Once you've added a pencil drawing onto your canvas, then you can start to paint. Usually it helps to do a really basic drawing, but to indicate maybe some areas where colors change. So I'm working on this apple right here. So I just did a basic apple drawing, but I indicated some of these areas where there are green spots versus the red. I also indicated where the background is, so we have the background here and the table here where the apple is sitting, and so those are some different areas that we need to consider. So while we are working on this painting, we have to consider the fact that we are using the primary colors, let's have this over here, plus white. We are not using any black, but we do need a dark in order to get darks in our painting. So in order to mix your black, what you need to do is take a little bit of each color and mix it together. And at first you might get a brown, but if you practice a little bit, eventually you'll get to a color that's a little more black. And just slowly add the other colors in as you're working to get it where you need it to be. A little more yellow there. So this is a pretty good brown here. So I'm going to add a little more blue to darken it down. And a touch of yellow. So you can establish a dark color like that you can use for the darker areas of your painting. Okay, so we'll move that aside. Just bring our painting a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay. All right, so you want to establish the background first. That's really going to help quite a bit. So I have to think about what colors do I want in the background. Just because I have red back here doesn't mean that I have to have red in the background. I can choose whatever I want back there. But I do want to have something different here as opposed to right here. I think I'd like to keep this front area pretty light and bright. So I'm going to do that with some yellow here and some white. I'm getting a real bright color, and it's going to do a little bit of transparency happening here with this bright in the front. Now I'm using a stiff brush and getting sort of a scratchy look on that front area. You can change your look depending on what kind of brush you use, and hopefully you've discovered some things as you were doing the painting techniques of different kind of techniques with the brushes. So I'm going to keep this nice and bright up here. I'm actually even going to make it real bright right in the front up here too. Just the tiniest bit of another color can make a difference in your colors. Okay, I'm going to blend this back into the background. It's going to get a little darker as it goes back there. I think I'm going to introduce a little bit of green in there. So what I'll do is take some of the blue and mix it in there with my yellow. Kind of a greenish color. I can blend a little. I'm still seeing some of that other color through underneath, which is fine. I don't mind that at all. I'm going to make a new color. It's a little brighter blue. This is very dry brush that I'm doing right here. You can choose how you like to do it, but I tend to like to use dry brush technique in this area. All right, and we'll do a little bit on this side as well. If you paint quickly, you can blend acrylics. If you don't paint quickly, they will dry, and you can't blend them on the canvas quite as easily. Okay, so I've got a little background there where this apple is sitting, and then I also have this back here. I'm going to have to decide what to do with that. Now I know I have reds and greens in here, and I need to choose what I'm going to do back here. I think what I'd like to do is mostly take it with white and blue. We'll mix that up. Kind of a lighter blue. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in up there. It's pretty solid at the top, and as it comes down, I'm using a little more of that dry brush technique, taking advantage of the background that I laid in earlier and blending it in. All right, now you've got to think about your apple. Okay, my apple is red, it's green, it has yellows in there. There's a lot of different things that I'm looking at. I'm going to start out taking advantage of this background that I've already painted in there. And I'm going to put in a base here of this green. There's a lot of green happening here, so I'm going to mix up a new green. Here it's kind of a bright green, so I'm going to do more yellow than blue. And right now I'm using a soft brush, which is going to make it easier for me to get those colors in those areas. The direction of the brush strokes that I'm using are mimicking the cross contour lines of this apple so that I can see what's happening in terms of the form. There is some lighter areas of green, so I'm going to use a little bit of white, go in there and lighten up some of that. Now right down in here is much darker. That's where the stem of the apple's coming out. So I'm going to put some of that light green here. Then I'm going to mix up some of that dark that I'm going to take some of that dark I mixed up earlier, and I'm going to use that down in here. I'm going to mix it with the green some, so it's nice and dark down in there. Now it does blend up to the other part of the apple. So I'm going to kind of blend it up. Okay. We also have a whole lot of red going on in this apple, so I'm going to do that with some of this red. And it's red, it's orange, it's yellow, there's a lot going on in there. So I'll mix up a couple different colors that I can work with. We can overlay like this to do a little broken color. So we're sort of blending visually I'm taking advantage of the background that I had already set in, letting some of it show through. And I'm doing a lot of dry brush right here. You can see the background showing through the dry brush strokes. A little glazing going over the top of things. And there's going to be some highlights on this apple. So I'm going to use my white up in here to show some of those highlights. And then I'm going to lighten this up a little bit in there. And there's a little stem in there. So I'm actually going to take that dark color that I mixed up earlier and put that in there for the stem. I'm actually going to use a much smaller brush. Get that dark color for that little stem. And the stem has a highlight on it too. So I can go in there with that tiny little bit of white and give it a little dot or two. Alright, so up here I might want to clean that up a little bit around the back because I want to make my apple show up a little better. And I've got that blue in the background, so I think what I'll do is just work with that and get myself a little more of that blue color and work on bringing it right up to the apple edge. You'll notice I've switched brushes several times while doing this. All right, and then there's a little bit of shadowing that's happening down here. And so I want to work on that. We'll get a little bit of this yellow. I'm going to darken it down to create a shadow color. Again, I'm going to use a dry brush here to add in the shadow that I'm seeing. It comes off to this side. And the shadow is usually a little darker right near the bottom. So we'll go ahead and give that a little darkness down there. Now there's usually more than one shadow that you see because the light from the light above you is going to cast a shadow, and maybe the light from the window is going to cast a shadow. So you might want to think about it, really look at your object, whatever it is that you're painting, and see what shadows you're dealing with. There might be one over here like I had for this one. It's a little darker coming out over here. And then you can always go back in and clean things up or add things that you might want to add. I'm a big fan of the dry brush, so I always like to go in and add a little bit of that in there. And there you go.